Le temps que le professeur Ruiz arrive, je souhaitais quand même parler de Pedro Ruiz. Je peux le dire, c'est quand même un événement que le professeur Pedro Ruiz soit avec nous aujourd'hui. Alors Pedro Ruiz, j'ai eu l'occasion de parler avec lui, a fait ses classes à Paris. Il a fait ses études de médecine il y a quelques années. Il est américain, évidemment, d'origine cubaine. Et il a été un des plus grands patrons de l'APA, l'Association des psychiatres américains, dont il a présidé pendant un petit moment. Il a été également président de la WPA, la World Psychiatric Association. Et il a fondé avec les collègues qui sont ici, on a le trésorier, il a fondé la WAD, la World Association of Dual Diagnosis. C'est vraiment un événement d'avoir ce grand scientifique, cet homme avec une vision planétaire et mondiale sur les questions de comorbidité. Et c'est vraiment un événement pour nous de le recevoir à Paris. Thank you, Pedro.
For me, it's a real pleasure being here in this particular Congress, which is very well put together and very well organized, and I am very appreciative for the invitation. Together with me, we have two of the leaders of the World Association on Dual Disorders, Dr. Nestor Sherman and Dr. Ikro Maremani. Both of them are going to be present, and I will present at the end. And the first presenter will be Nestor. Nestor is from Madrid, Spain, very much involved in academia, and as I said before, in the leadership of the Organization of Dual Disorders, and he will be talking to us on the topic of rethinking dual diagnosis in the context of neurosciences and in the field of neurosciences. Nestor.
Thank you, Pedro, for this kind presentation. Bonjour. Thank you to all, and in special thank you to the organizers. Thank you, Amin Benjamina, for this kind invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm very happy to be here once again here in Paris in this terrific meeting. Okay, I'm going to talk about dual disorders, and we need to rethink dual disorders in the context of the field of neurosciences. The big one, okay. Okay, related to this presentation, I don't have any conflict of interest. It's my disclosure, and these are the topics that I'll be addressing during this presentation. A short view about epidemiological evidence of dual disorders, the definition of the term dual disorder, from now on DDs, dual disorders and neuroscience, and conclusions. Okay, what about the epidemiological evidence of dual disorders? In this slide, you can see the main 4 epidemiological studies in general population in USA. All of them have indicated that dual disorders are an expectation, not an exception. Despite this fact, only 7% of these individuals receive treatment for DDs, according to recent SAMHSA report. Why is this? Okay, about the definition of the term dual disorders? Dual disorder, what does this mean? This is a term used in the mental health field to refer to those patients who suffer from an addictive disorder and other mental disorders. They can occur simultaneously, or even more importantly, from the conceptual point of view, sequentially throughout the lifespan. And which came first, the chicken or the egg? This is the old philosophical question, but I tried to answer this question, at least in the field of dual disorders, during this presentation. In this field, we have an additional difficulty. There are many different and conflicting schools of thought about the nature of this condition. The reality is that DDs have been ignored or denied for years. In any case, are we talking about 2 different and separate mental disorders, or are we talking about different manifestations, different psychopathological expression of a single clinical entity? Many years ago, Dr. Volkow wrote this editorial talking about this high congruency. But she highlighted something even more important. This high comorbidity is probably reflecting common brain factors and brain substrates. As you can see, another common term used in our field is comorbidity. Why is, in my opinion, comorbidity problematic? Because the term describes the relationship between two independent and different categorical diagnoses. Are these, in fact, two independent diagnoses? As you can see, I have a lot of questions during this presentation. This is the reason because between this alternative, we prefer dual disorders over dual diagnosis or comorbidity. Because the term necessarily specifies a relationship and also implies interaction, which could reflect common brain factors. Okay, let's move on to the main block of this presentation, dual disorders in the mental health field. In this field, in the mental health field, we are having a fascinating debate about the concept of mental disorders. And we need to rethink dual disorders, mental disorders, addictive disorders in light of new evidence coming from the neuroscience research. I'm going to talk about dual disorders as brain disorders, dual disorders in the perspective of evolutionary psychiatry, dual disorder as neurodevelopmental disorders, dual disorder as genetic diseases, and dual disorders and the new concept of precision medicine. Let's start with some statement. In recent years, all mental disorders are considered brain disorders. And second, the lack of sensitivity and reliability of the current diagnostic criteria of mental disorders make it difficult to include different expression, different clinical expression of different mental disorders, including dual disorders. In fact, scientific advances in the field of addiction have forever debunked the notion that addiction reflects a character flaw under voluntary control, demonstrating instead that it is a disease of the brain. We have a lot of evidence demonstrating that addiction is a brain disease. In fact, are mental disorders, addictive disorders, dual disorders located in different brain areas? It's without sense. This article was published 2 years ago in the New England Journal of Medicine by Dr. Volkov and colleagues, supporting the brain disease model of addiction. Some of the key points of this, in my opinion, essential paper are only a minority of people who use drugs ultimately become addicted. In fact, the most severe phenotypic characteristic of addiction will develop in only approximately 10% of persons exposed to heroin, cocaine, cannabis, or other drugs. Why is this? Susceptibility differs because people differ in their vulnerability to various neurodevelopmental, genetic, and environmental factors. This is the reason because nobody can choose to be addicted. Only the individual who has this susceptibility to being addicted become addicted. Current research also suggests neurobiological similarities between obesity, binge eating disorder, gambling use disorder, neurobehavioral disorders, and of course, substance use disorders. Different neurobiological theories about addictive disorders have been proposed by researchers during the last decades. But all psychoactive substances with abuse potential bind to some endogenous system, such as endocannabinoid system, opioid system, cholinergic nicotinic system, and finally, the common dopaminergic brain reward system. And how relevant are these systems? From an evolutionary perspective, they have evolved for individual and evolutionary survival of the species, not to get high, of course. Both addictive behavior and other mental symptoms can be explained by an inherited and or acquired deficit in these systems and brain circuits. In fact, these systems and circuits seem to play a crucial role in all mental disorders. These fundamental biological processes, when disrupted, can alter voluntary behavioral control not just in drug addiction, but also in other related disorders. And what happened with the relationship between evolutionary psychiatric and dual disorders? As you know, the aim of the human brain throughout all evolution has been survival, and mental function can be explained in light of this evolutionary perspective. From this evolutionary perspective, emotions are the result of a long evolutionary process, and emotional responses exist because they increase our ability to survive. From this perspective, we know there are not good or bad genes. Depending on the different contexts, genetic variants may represent a risk factor or a protective factor. It's the same for the environment. The harmful environment is a risk factor. You can think about victims of child abuse, for example, although in some individuals, the traumatic experience increases their life resilience. From this evolutionary perspective, animals would benefit from a neural mechanism, circuitry, that supports an animal's ability to pursue natural rewards, food, water, sex. However, these circuits are sometimes dysfunctional, leading to various types of disorders. Let's turn our attention to neurodevelopmental disorders and dual disorders. At this time, most mental disorders are considered, probably all of them, are considered neurodevelopmental disorders. For example, in this slide you can see the brain of children who had lived in an orphanage. Children with emotional deprivation versus control had less connectivity between amygdala and frontal cortex, proportional to time they spent in an orphanage. This could lead later in their life to heighten emotional reactivity and impair cognitive control, and develop dual disorders, probably. I would like to add something more. In Western countries, children who are living in orphanage, most of them have parents, biological parents, with mental disorders or dual disorders. Therefore, we need to consider the genetic factor here. And when do the first symptoms of addiction and disease start? From this perspective, addictions, and of course dual disorders, are commonly preceded by problems in childhood and adolescence. For many individuals, addiction and disease begin with the early expression of psychopathology. At this moment, I try to answer the initial question, which came first, the chicken or the egg? From this perspective, from the neuroscience perspective, it is known that the brain presents changes long before mental disorders are diagnosed. These brain changes can occur with sub-threshold symptoms that precede the onset of disease, for example, substance use disorder or the first psychotic symptom, making the egg or chicken debate irrelevant. At this moment, at this time, we consider all mental disorder as genetic disease, of course. One drunkard begets another, wrote the Greek philosopher. And we agree with him and with the scientific community that addictive disorder is a genetic disease. The general concept that addiction runs in families is beyond dispute, wrote Dr. Volkov. However, the addictive phenotype could remain hidden because environmental factors may be protective. For example, the absence of exposure to drugs, even though a large genetic load may be present. You can think in small religious communities or people who are living in Islamic countries, for example. And what about this new concept, precision medicine? This initiative was released in 2015 by NIH. The aim of precision medicine is to enter a new era by changing our traditional concept, and it has been defined as an approach for treatment and prevention that takes into account each person's variability in genes, environment, and lifestyle. Let's try to explain a little more this concept. In this slide, you can see different people with different colors. The different colors represent different phenotypes. You can think about different ethnicities or different personality traits, avoidant people, impulsive people, or men or women. In the treatment A, all of them, evidence-based medicine, are receiving and have been exposed to the same treatment. And the result is very poor. To the contrary, the precision medicine, with the focus in precision medicine, we need to treat every group of patients, every group of phenotypes patients in different ways, and the results will be more successful. For example, in this slide you can see 1 cup of coffee in 2 different individuals. If you prefer 2 different brains, you can question why some people drink coffee to be more awake and others to sleep better. The same substance have different effects on different individuals. It's the same for all kinds of drugs. Cocaine, stimulants, you can think about children or adults with ADHD, or heroin, or cannabis, or tobacco, or alcohol. This editorial was published a few weeks ago by Dr. Volkov with the title Toward Precision Medicine in Addiction Treatment. Some points, for example, gene variants determine the therapeutic dose of methadone in African American patients. It has implications beyond addiction treatment. Related to tobacco, for example, gene variants related to alpha-5 nicotinic cholinergic receptor predict the individual who smoke more heavily. We have a lot of more examples. Clinicians do not always have specific biological markers to work with. We can think of clinical endophenotypes and neurobehavioral mechanisms such as personality traits, mental disorders, to think about different phenotypes of patients. For example, in this animal study, in highly impulsive rats, acute cocaine use decreased impulsivity. In the same paper, to the contrary, less impulsive rats increased impulsivity or didn't affect the impulsivity. This is another paper. Impulsivity predicted addiction to cocaine in highly impulsive rats, but not their addiction to heroin. Impulsivity predicted addiction to cocaine, but not to heroin. Another example, 4 basic tastes, sweet, salty, sour, and bitter, are connected to emotion, and they have a role in survival. Individuals with alcohol use disorder who like sweets, who have sweeting-like phenotypes, may be more likely to respond to treatment with naltrexone than other individuals with different phenotype or with this endophenotype. So, humans are unpredictable. Because of diversity in genotype and environment, one man's meat is another man's poison. Therefore, we must adopt a new approach and consider individual differences when we investigate the role of the genotype in the effect of substance abuse on the brain structure. Fear of change, we need to move from the classical perspective to a new one with the focus on precision medicine. This is a joke, of course. Therefore, are we moving from the old paradigm based on drug-induced neuroplasticity, largely dominant in laboratory research, to a new one, individual-centered approach, with the focus on recognizing the strong connection between addiction and other mental disorders? Okay, this new paradigm should be reflected in our actions as well as our words, of course. To summarize, addiction and other mental disorders involve multiple factors. On one hand, genes, brain circuits, neurodevelopment. On the other hand, environment. Both of these factors lead in vulnerable people to develop mental disorders. When young people, when adolescents who are in highest risk to develop mental disorders use drugs, they use drugs earlier than other adolescent than healthy adolescent, and they are in a high risk to develop mental disorders. Research approaches to addiction have evolved to reflect the real world. Compulsive drug users goes beyond simple reinforcement mechanism. Research is going to identify distinctive neurobehavioral mechanisms and endophenotypes that predispose individuals to compulsive drug use. However, research in active drug users is hampered by the difficulty in categorizing causal behavioral traits prior to the initiation of drug use. In fact, addiction co-occur with distinct personality traits, other psychiatric disorder or symptoms, and cognitive impairment, that which we call dual disorders. In the new clinical perspective, we must always try to diagnose dual disorders in patients requiring care for addictive behavior or mental disorders. One of the barriers to this goal is the lack of sensitivity and reliability of the current diagnostic criteria of mental disorders. The new paradigm of dual disorders tells us that we should treat the individual rather than the substance, as we have done so far. We should treat the individual rather than the substance. We need to rethink dual disorders in light of new evidence from neuroscience research. The last slide, to the future. As is often unlikely happening in science, the dual disorders field has continually evolved with new findings that push the concept beyond established views. We believe that new surprises await us in the future when new data will replace the currently consolidated views in our field. Thank you for your attention, and thank you, Pedro, and all the for submitting.